especially for those brands that are starting to do some serious volume, that becomes more and more important as you grow. That too.
It's snowing outside.
It is.
It's getting cold.
I was on the way over in a taxi and it was snowing, and they had Last Christmas on, which I thought was a bit early for like mid-November, but
it's not even mid-November. It's 19th. I'm all about the early Christmas songs. Me, I think me and Liv might be putting up our decorations probably in the next week or so. Because if you think about it, I'm not going to be here for probably half of December anyway. So
Christmas doesn't exist till Black Friday's over. You should be in that mindset.
I need it to get me through that last little push. How are you finding Black Friday anyway so far?
Good, like a lot of variation in sale timelines this year. Obviously there's that like trend of big businesses going earlier and earlier, which is interesting every year. I think.
What do you think is kind of, the reason for that?
Probably all layers back to growth and forecast, I imagine, to some degree. I think there's some brands that have like, there's a conversation I think to be had with around like strategy based on sort of AOV consideration window, capturing share of wallet earlier than other brands, and that'll look different by business. I think as you go more omni-channel, if you're in retail, you've got to consider retailers' activations and how they play alongside your site and your trading activity.
Yeah, that's one we've seen this year a bit, isn't it? Lining up with retail.
I think it's difficult if you're in a retail store and they run a Black Friday activation and they run it across Google paid, and you lose all your search traffic to them because they're pricing you out of the market. So I've seen that a few times. It's been varied. I think results have been really strong across the board. I think ultimately, like, you lay the foundations for Black Friday over the course of the previous sort of 9 to 10 months, and the brands that have executed the best through that period will get the best results, and that's what we're seeing. But we're not into the real furnace yet. Like, that's next week, and I'm excited to see what it brings. So it's just an exciting period, isn't it?
Yeah. It's an exciting period, and I was saying to someone, I was on a call with a brand the other day, and it's like I never actually capitalised myself on Black Friday.
Yeah,
like I feel like because it's always so busy, I just never actually think about buying anything for myself. But I think coming back to what you said, there's been some things that I've already bought with Black Friday offers this month, even for going back to like the start of November.
What have you got your eye on? Any
boring stuff, like Hoovers and
yeah, that's exciting for when you get past the age of like 25.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting old when your mum asks you what you want for Christmas, and you're like, pots and pans.
I asked my mum for some pasta balls.
Nice. Hex-clad?
No, just like probably just some simple white ones. I'm eyeing up the Our Place mini oven, which is an air fryer oven and toaster all in one.
Oh, nice.
It's like a oven that you pull down from the front.
I just don't have room for a massive air fryer.
I think I'm going to get rid of my toaster. It's an amazing little bit of kit from what I saw it in Selfridges the other day.
Yeah. Wonder if that's something that will never get used, like the pizza oven.
Yeah, it just sits there untouched.
Nice. All right. Well, today we want to just like go free ball a bit, going into a few little areas, just like how we use strategy to drive ideation and concepting with creatives. A little bit about like approach to hypothesizing and how we're running tests. Now, we're not talking about in terms of when we get into the ad account, what the logistics are there, more so from the perspective of like how we're running tests, how we're tracking against those tests, and taking those learnings forward.
Yeah, I think you've got obviously a few different like almost like subsets of a creative process. You've got or like performance process. You've got like iterative. You've got bigger swing pieces. You've got like framework based things where you're using concepts or structures that have worked before. And I think you have to make them. The best process will combine all of those, but there's a way to think about it kind of strategically to get the most out of your resource and the most out of your ad account.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes back to that research piece. If you haven't seen that episode, should be the last one or 2 episodes ago. We'll put the link down below. But it all comes back to that, and like building that database of like, okay, what are the best performing organic videos within your niche that have gone viral, competitor ads that are the longest running, your best performers within the ad account from the last 30, 90, 365 days, and building that database, because then they're almost like you can cherry pick those, the lowest hanging fruit really, that you want to potentially be running on a monthly basis alongside some of those bigger swings as well. But the first thing, like if I'm looking at concepting, I won't go too deep into like, our whole approach to like creative strategy. I think that's an episode in itself. But the issue that I see a lot of the time is like people think about the concept first before some of the other elements that are really, really important before you even get onto that ideation and the concepting. So the first is like the funnel stage. So where does it sit within the performance funnel? Is it unaware? Is it, which could be a founder story type creative, like, I just discovered or I didn't know about? Is it problem aware? So you're aware of the problem, but not aware of the potential solutions. Solution aware, so it could be an us versus them, focusing on the benefits, the features, driving people through to that solution. Product, which is more objection handling, PR, trust. You're really just kind of trying to nudge people over the edge there. And then most aware, so that is obviously your offer focus creative. So you really need to know where it sits within that funnel. After that, we then look at the actual persona. So what persona is this creative for? Now, this is where we would come back to those persona tables that we built out in that last episode. Based on each of your personas, you're going to have one or two top performing angles for that persona. So which angle within that persona do we want to be using? And then the last is content type. And obviously this is, when I say content type, I don't mean static, UGC, high prod. That's another consideration. But I'm more talking about, is it a big swing? Is it a framework driven concept? So framework is like, or we call it big impact sometimes, because these are like, the lowest hanging fruit opportunities, the best chance of driving success, because it's following data. So that could fall into one of our strategic buckets that I'll get into in a moment, but it kind of goes back to that thing of like, okay, a framework driven concept could be taking a competitor ad, using that framework and improving elements of it. It could be one of your best performers, taking one of those best performers that you already have a framework that you've built out and testing it against a different UGC creator potentially, or, improving the hook slightly because the TSR was lower on the previous, but then had really good other metrics. An organic creative. So what is gone viral organically? How can we apply that organic framework to paid theory in a way? So these are like some of the things that we will consider as part of that before we even get onto the part of concepting. So let's say it is a framework driven concept in comparison to like a big swing, because big swing is really out of the box concept. Maybe there's some hypothesis as to why it might work, but it is purely a hypothesis and there isn't actually data that suggests it. So it's much more out of the box, bit of a wild card. And really, you don't want to be over indexing on this type of creative. I think we've made that mistake before with Tev, didn't we? We wanted to just do a month where we just ran big swings and it didn't work.
Yeah, I think a really good example of that, which became like a really big thing sort of last year, was those Zoom call concepts.
Yeah.
And like these like FaceTime
or even
concepts.
Text message concepts were those as well.
Yeah, and like they work every now and then, but they don't work like consistently all the time.
They're harder to execute.
Yeah, they're so much harder. And they're like a really big swing. Overnight oats, which we mentioned, I think last episode, they're a really good example. They do a lot of big swings.
A lot.
All the time. Like they are so creative in the way
they're innovators, I would say, of a lot of the big swings that you see online.
I'd say Dr. Squatch and High Smile are probably both the same, but they're also brands that are creating such a high volume that they're doing everything else and then they're layering that on top. So but we like, obviously those things stick out the most.
Yeah.
Frameworks and like using framework is just like using things that work basically.
Exactly.
And it's like, I think there's probably 50-60% more you can get out of those for most brands than you think.
Yeah.
So many different ways to approach it. in terms of how to reproduce those frameworks across like type of content, across creators, across lengths, pacing, all sorts. But yeah, it's real important to balance the two and not go too hard into sort of big swing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like the funnel piece as well is like really important, and surprisingly like not many do it. And I'll show you an example of like how a hook could change at different points in the funnel. So let's say it's my favorite example, the filtered shower head, which is supposed to, improve skin, things like that, reduced breakouts, whatever. But an example of like an unaware hook within that might be showers are destroying your skin and you don't even know about it. If you go to problem where, that might be hard water was giving me breakouts until I discovered this filtered shower head. Solution might be 3 reasons why you need this filtered shower head. Product might be an objection handling of filtered shower heads don't work, and then you handle that objection. And most aware is, I can't believe they're offering 10% off this filtered shower head. So you can see how it completely changes the dynamic of the ad based on where it sits within that funnel. So it's really important that you identify that first. So let's say, we're going for a framework-driven concept once we've decided where we're sitting within the funnel. We now have like these strategic buckets that we can tap into that will be different types of frameworks, right? So one of those might be like iterative, and the really what this is about is improving or recreating what is already working within the account. And that in terms of like the conditions of that, you might be looking at it's one of the top spenders, or it's at the desired spend levels, and it's above or on your maybe CPA targets. Yeah. Now you've got different objectives within that strategic bucket. So that might be changing one element to drive better TSR of the same creative. So that's iterative is one form of framework that you can do. Ad account is like very similar. It's still iterative in a sense, but that's combining what is already working in the account. So that might be 2 creatives that you're bringing together that both have different strengths in them, but that will then combat each other's weaknesses. So maybe they both are hitting CPA targets, but one has a really strong hook and the other has a strong CTR. So we want to maybe plug these together, these frameworks together. We can still recreate them, not as an iterative creative, but we're going to take learnings from both of them and combine them into one framework.
Yeah, I think this is where that obviously changing content types comes in as well, and like taking hook message or static angle and flipping it to the other format.
Yeah.
And I think that's underutilized as well across brands. I think it's something we're trying to do a lot more now, is taking the angle that's worked in a video and applying it to a static asset, and then using the static headline that works to apply to a video.
Exactly.
And speed up the process there and take more learnings.
Yeah, the example I always use is because it's like it works so well, was like taking the best performing UGC ASMR and then recreating that using the exact same framework, similar messaging, but applying that to high production and more polished creative. So like you say, it can then sit across different types of assets. The third bucket is competitor. So maybe we're recreating a competitor framework that we've seen as the longest running ad. Again, going to give us the best chance of success there because we are tapping into what we know has already worked for one of the competitors within our space. One I mentioned already was organic as well. That's another strategic card. So an organic video that's gone viral, there's a reason why that's gone viral. It's really captured attention organically. So therefore, there's a lot we can take from that shows that is going to do the same thing via paid, as long as we add some of that paid theory in and some of the, maybe the more direct response aspects to that. Now, we don't want to lose the authenticity of that organic, so we don't want to change too much. But for example, we might want to include a CTA. We might want to adjust the hook very slightly in terms of like the actual messaging used. The next one is internal framework. So maybe, and this is something we recommend doing, building a database of your best performing frameworks within the account that you know that of all that you might have from even other niches. So like looking at other niches, other brands that aren't competitors to yours, what are their longest running ads? Pull that into a framework, and you could test that against your brand.
I think you've got some of those like always on quick win frameworks as well. Like
Yeah,
the if you're always on, maybe not so much always on, but definitely worth testing. So like how to's, comment replies, controversial opinions, checklists, truths and facts,
yeah,
unboxing, BTS, like those buckets that every brand can kind of, the three reasons why, like those ones that are like holistic frameworks, not just a framework within your business, that are
exactly.
worth like starting with or at least testing through, that can be added to this process as well.
Yeah, like a simple problem solution
Yeah,
framework as an example. Yeah, and there's loads of them. So that might be, yeah, as you already said, some of those more macro frameworks that we see across paid social, or alternatively, it might be a framework that you've seen work for, a brand that is outside of your niche. So they're just some of those like strategic buckets that we might pull in to that framework driven concept. So we've got where it sits in the funnel. We know the angle, the persona, and the content type. We have the strategic bucket that we're picking if it's a framework concept, and then we can get onto the actual like element of concepting from that. Now, most of your job will be done by that point. You know, for the most part, if we're going with a framework driven concept, most of that will have been already built out for you. But the next thing I will do here is build this into like a framework table, and I'll go back to our research and look at, okay, as you know, and if you watch the previous episode, you'll see we've built a list under benefits, features, pain points, failed solutions, of loads of quotes through Reddit, through organic social, where people have been talking about these different areas and how we've segmented them into objections, problems, solutions, because then we can use the same language that people are actually using online, to make it feel as authentic as possible, and make sure that we're speaking from the side of the customer rather than the side of the brand.
I think that's so key as well. It's so key. You get brands can become a bit stiff in the way they talk about the product.
Yeah.
I think we spoke about that last episode, and consumers speak about it. So again, illuminating in how and seeing how consumers will speak about a certain problem, a certain product, a certain solution, a certain before and after state, and how much of a difference that can make when you bring it into your own creative.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of how we would like go about building a concept. Obviously, we've simplified that quite a lot. And if we were building a big swing, it's probably gonna, that's where you probably have to become a lot more creative. It's a lot less formulaic. But
Yeah, I think the next level, the next step on this, which we're on the path to, is that kind of like macro account level learnings, and splits, and like that dashboard view of like our spend by various frameworks, various creator demographics, various age
yeah,
groups, various types of content. I think one thing that really makes this process easier is really robust naming conventions, which I think is something, again, brands overlook or businesses overlook. Like a lot of e-com success can be codified within your naming conventions, and like how easy they are to work with, how easy they can be pulled backwards into, and viewed from a top line of like, what is this asset, and then pulled together across an account to give you like a cross section of
so true.
what you're spending on, what you aren't spending on, gaps in your strategy, spend by certain frameworks. You don't want to become over leveraged in one angle, one framework, one creator. We've been through that process. We were too one dimensional in our creator demographics, and it limited our like incremental reach. So I think, especially for those brands that are starting to do some serious volume, that becomes more and more important as you grow.
Yeah, like it's so important to do, because like in Motion, you can just pull reports based on elements of those naming conventions. So yeah, within ours, we would include where it sits in the funnel, the angle, the persona, even if we're using a UGC creator, who is that creator, like the name of that specific creator. The type of content as well is another big one, and this will all be within that naming convention, so you can just really easily isolate those different variables.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I also think that's one thing I'm working on really extensively at the moment in Jack is organizing creative, like, and tagging creative up in your like frame, or we're using Air, and we're sadly we didn't start doing it at the start, and we've got thousands of assets. But it's like tagging every asset up by like, because it just feeds that editing process, and like we're early in the process. I'm hoping to make a massive dent in it over the next 30 days. And tagging like what the hook is, using ChatGPT to just put the script in the description, so you can literally search through like assets, pull out pair things together to build new concepts once you've got that raw library kind of established over time. I think that's something that, similar to the naming conventions, it's like admin almost, but it's just so important for like that creative process, because it makes things so much easier to do.
It also means you can like your editors can become more autonomous if they understand like paid theory. They can literally, if that's set up and it's labeled correctly, they can just go in and create iterations at scale.
Yeah, it's just, sadly we didn't start that early enough, so that's a big process that we're under at the moment.
God, that's a behemoth task to ever.
It'll take us a while.
Yeah. Nice. I'd love to know like what your approach is, you know, in terms of like how you're running tests, like how you approach kind of coming up with a hypothesis, how you record that, and, you know, take the learnings forward.
For creative specifically,
yes.
Yeah, I think there's multiple inputs into that process. There's obviously like ad account data, there's the research we went through last week, and I think they all come from different places. Like, you've got the media buyer who's driving like ad account learnings, you've maybe got a creative strategist or a head of growth who's driving net new ideas, and it all starts with idea, like ad idea, and then that turns into like an active brief. So we will just try and like document into like a almost like just a table, like as many ad ideas as we possibly can through the form of like a creative meeting. We'll then prioritize those ideas through like impact, confidence, effort, like what do we want to take forward into a brief, and then we'll move that through the process. In terms of like building a hypothesis around that test, like that is all based in like data, whether that's customer research. I'm not going to rehash all the things we went through, but like all of the things we mentioned last episode, so many different ideas will come if you just run that process. You could probably build 50 to 100 hypotheses within a couple of days if you run it properly. And then also continuously reviewing ad account for like iterative hypothesis as well. So we use those two things as like the foundation for writing those up, and each idea will be attached to a hypothesis, and then it's about taking it through, testing it in the right way, reflecting really intentionally, like writing conclusions around that piece of creative and what you learn, and then re-entering that into the like creative meeting and reflecting on those learnings and running that process over and over again.
Yeah, nice. And because I think like the mistake that a lot of people make is they might come up with a hypothesis and test it, but then not actually go back to document the learnings or know whether, you know, whether it's actually worked or not, or to what level it's worked.
Yeah. Sorry, bear with me.
He's got a cold. So
I'm just gonna have to cut that. Say that again. I just have to cut that out and put it in again.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, a lot of people will go through that process of building a hypothesis, testing it, but then not actually come back to document their learnings. What maybe advice do you have for, you know, how you can do that? How you can, whether it be a traffic light system to show to the level it worked at?
I think you ideally want to pull data learnings, then also like written learnings against the concept. like pulling in the hook, pulling in the script, and then like just reflecting on like why do you think it worked. And I do think there's an element of like it's never actually possible to tell. Sometimes do you ever look at an asset and you're like, I just have no idea why that's worked.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, of
and
course.
I think there was a client of ours where like they'd accidentally uploaded a product image incorrectly, and it was just the corner of the image rather than the full thing, and it was like a top performing asset. And it's just like no matter how much like theory, like there's no explaining that. It's just like it worked, and you just can't outcompete it. But I think like you want to be reflecting intentionally. You want to be trying to like review things on a granular level because it informs the process. It allows you to ultimately just increase the chances of creating winning ads and increase that hit rate and reduce your cost per winner, which I guess is the ultimate like success metric for e-com brands, is like how much does it cost to make a winning ad, and can you make more of them for the same or less cost?
Yeah, no, completely agree. Cool. Well, short and sweet this week. I think we're going to get booted out in a minute. So
We've got some heavy hitting guests coming.
We do.
To give a preview, I don't know when, we've got Dan from Pure Sport, Jack from Purdy and Fig, and a couple of other
Daniel from Incense,
Rishi from Nutrition Geeks. We've got some really big brands coming, so hopefully everyone has enjoyed the episode.
Yeah. We're as we said in the previous one, we are consistently now hitting the weekly upload. So obviously do us a favor. We'd appreciate if you could obviously give us 5-star on Spotify. It goes a long way. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Leave a comment. We will answer any questions live on the podcast. And yeah, appreciate all the support. I think we're getting some great feedback, and we're going to keep pushing these. And we do have a big announcement about the pod for next year that we won't do right now, but we've got some cool things coming up that we're going to be doing that I don't think has been done before. So yeah, we'll see you on the next episode.